The sheriff clicked the cuffs around her wrists in the dirt behind my barn, right where she once had me cuffed on my own porch, like some stranger breaking in. Her eyes, blown wide in the harsh white of the cruiser's lights, bolt cutters still dangling from her hand, like a bad punchline. And in that moment, all I could think was 3 days ago, this woman tried to evict me from the land where I scattered my wife's ashes, and now she is the one taking that long walk to the back seat. She thought I was just a broken old widower who would roll over when the fines and threats started piling up. She thought she knew exactly how this story ended. What she did not know was that the man she picked to bully for fun is the same guy the federal government sends when HOAs go off the rails. And by the time those cuffs closed on her, there were a lot of people above her pay grade already watching every move she made. My name is Mark Collins. I am not a lawyer. I am not a cop. I am one of those boring people who read bylaws and audit reports for a living. And for almost 20 years, I have worked for a small federal office with a long name, the Homeowner Association Oversight Division, which basically means I spend my days flying around the country making sure neighborhood associations do not turn into little dictatorships. And yeah, that happens more than you might think. While my wife Emily was sick, the Saab kept the bills paid, and the lights on when she passed. It was the only routine I had left. The only thing that still made a kind of sense. The one thing in my life that was not fluorescent lighting and stale conference rooms was our place out in Colorado, 40 acres on the edge of a development called Canyon Ridge Meadows, with scrub pine and a creek and an old farmhouse with a porch that creaks when you step on the third board, and a little wooden dock out on a stock pond behind the house. The kind of place where the air actually smells like dirt and water instead of exhaust and air freshener. Emily's grandparents carved that ranch out of the ground before there was even a paved road out there. We got married under the big cottonwood by the water, and when she lost her fight with cancer, I carried her ashes down that dock and let the wind take her out across the pond. So when I tell you that land is sacred to me, I am not being poetic. I mean, that is the last solid piece of my life with her that the world has not already taken. I had been on the road for 3 straight months when this started, audit after audit from Phoenix to Pittsburgh, one beige hotel room after another, an angry board president after another. And by the time I finally turned off the highway onto that long gravel road that leads home, I could almost feel the porch under my boots. I could taste the pine air and hear the old barn settling into the night. And for a second, I let myself breathe. I killed the engine, stepped out of the truck, the dust hanging in the air like a curtain. And instead of quiet, I heard a voice cut across the driveway, sharp and loud, like I had just jumped the fence at a prison yard. A woman in a neon yellow safety vest was standing at the end of my drive with her arms folded around a clipboard. Her phone held up, recording me. Like I was breaking into the place, chin tilted up just enough to make sure I saw the little name tag pinned to her chest. Brenda Klein, HOA President. "Can I help you?" I asked, setting my bag down, trying to keep my voice easy because I honestly thought maybe she was lost. Or maybe she was out there checking on some new build and just wandered over. She did not even pretend to be polite. She did not ask who I was. She just raised her voice so it would carry like she wanted the whole mountain to hear. "You're on restricted property," she said, enunciating every syllable. "Canyon Ridge Meadows is a registered association community. Only authorized residents and guests are allowed past this point. You need to turn around and leave." I gave a little disbelieving laugh because, come on, I have been dealing with difficult HOA presidents my whole career, but nobody had ever opened with calling me a trespasser on my own land. "Ma'am, I live here," I said, trying to keep the edge out of my tone. "Name's Mark Collins. This is my ranch." I walked back to the truck, opened the glove box, and pulled out the deed, the original one Emily's grandfather handed us. Still in its old plastic sleeve, the paper yellowed at the edges. Our name typed right there next to the legal description. And I held it out between us like a shield. Brenda glanced at it, the way you glance at a grocery receipt that is not yours. Then let her eyes drift past my hand and over my property. The security light on the barn, the straight fence line, the dock on the pond. With this look of deep personal disgust, like every single thing she saw offended her philosophy of life. "While you were gone," she said, voice smoothing into that bureaucratic sing-song. "The board reassessed parcels for multiple violations of community standards. Certain structures are unapproved. According to our files, this lot is in dispute. Your presence here right now constitutes trespassing." That little dock she jabbed her pen toward was the place where Emily and I sat when the chemo made her too tired to walk the fields. That was the last solid ground her feet ever touched. And hearing it described as some illegal, unapproved structure felt like having somebody spit on a headstone. I could feel my jaw lock, but 20 years in government meetings teaches you how to swallow things down. "Look, Brenda," I said, because I had read her name tag. "I've been out of town. If there's some code issue, tell me what it is. We'll walk the property, make a list. I'll fix it. I don't want trouble. I just got home. I thought I was being reasonable, neighborly even. And that was my mistake, because bullies do not hear. Let's work this out. They hear this guy does not know his leverage." Instead of putting the phone down, she lifted it back up. But this time she was calling, not filming. "Yes, this is the HOA president for Canyon Ridge Meadows," she said. Second someone answered, her eyes locked on mine. "I need a deputy at 417 Creek Bend Road. We have a hostile squatter refusing to leave and becoming aggressive." Hostile squatter. That is what she called me, standing 10 feet from the porch where my wife had died. And I could feel something in my chest go cold. "Ma'am, you might want to tell them I own this place," I said quietly. But she turned away like I was a leaf blowing in the wind. 10 minutes later, a sheriff's SUV came up the drive, gravel crunching, lights off, but presence, loud young deputy uniform. Crisp hand resting on his sidearm, because he had already heard her version of the story. She hustled over, whispering fast, pointing at me, showing him a stack of printed papers with seals and logos, whatever she had cooked up to look official. And I could see the moment he made up his mind. He approached me slow, that careful pace they teach you when you think someone might bolt, and said, "I need you to turn around and put your hands behind your back." "Deputy." "I live here," I said, forcing my hands to stay open at my sides. "The deed is in my truck. You can see my name on it. This land's been in my family for decades. We can sort that out later," he said. "Right now, I need you to comply." The metal felt colder than I remembered from the last time I wore cuffs, which for the record was during a training exercise 20 years ago, not on the porch of my own house. As he walked me past Brenda, she did not look scared or relieved. She looked like someone who had just won a game. At the station, they sat me in a plastic chair, took my license, made some calls, and after a couple of hours, an older man with gray at his temples and the tired eyes of someone who has seen every kind of small-town mess. There is walked over, Mr. Collins. He said your ID checks out, and the county records show the property in your name, but her paperwork looks official, and I don't have the time or budget to unravel a civil dispute like this. My advice, get yourself a lawyer and let them fight it out. Try to keep things calm in the meantime. I did not blame Sheriff Porter. I really didn't, because if all you have to go on is a stack of HOA documents that look legit and a woman speaking fluent legalese, you assume she is telling the truth. When I got back to the ranch, wrists still marked red where the cuffs had been, Brenda was waiting again this time with reinforcements. A skinny guy with a receding hairline, clutching a clipboard like a life raft, and another woman with the kind of permanent frown that etches itself into your face when you spend your life being mad about other people's fences. They announced they were conducting an emergency compliance inspection and started pacing my land like they were mapping a crime scene. The security light on the barn went down as excessive light pollution. The gravel driveway as improper aggregate posing erosion risk. And I almost laughed when the nervous guy wrote up my fence as too straight, creating an unnatural visual barrier. Then they got to the pond, and Brenda, making sure I could hear every word, said, "Unapproved dock. Severe decay, immediate safety hazard," as she scribbled on her sheet. And I had to dig my fingernails into my palms not to break something. Up on the hill, a few neighbors stood by their mailboxes pretending to check the mail, pretending not to stare, and one of them, an old rancher named Roy Jenkins, leaned on his fence, caught my eye, and gave me a slow nod that said, "I see what is happening, and I am not stepping into that fire, because I know exactly how hot she burns people." A little while later, after they were done turning my life into a list of violations, the sheriff's SUV pulled up again on another call from Brenda. She pointed at my old pickup like it was a rusted-out hazard to national security and said, "This vehicle is in clear violation of our appearance code. Sheriff, it needs to be towed." Then she stepped close, shoved a thick packet of papers into my chest, and read off a list of fines. Like she was announcing game scores. 500 a day for the illegal dock, 200 for the driveway, 100 for the lighting, and this is your 72-hour notice to vacate the property. Her voice dropped just enough, so only I could hear the last part. "You have 3 days, Mr. Collins. After that, the board will pursue removal." Losing the land would have been bad enough, but the part that strangled me was the idea that I might be forced to sell, might never again stand on that dock or walk that fence line, because some HOA president decided my grief did not match her aesthetic. The next morning, before the sun was fully up, I stepped out on the porch with my coffee, hoping for a quiet minute, and instead heard this angry mechanical whine cutting through the dawn. A black drone hovered out near the fence, perfectly centered on my house camera eye, pointing straight at me. I followed the line back, and there she was again, Brenda in a lawn chair on her own property tablet. In her lap, flying that thing like she was conducting an orchestra. Wherever I walked that day, the drone followed. To the barn, to the mailbox, down to the dock, hovering over the water where Emily's ashes settled, casting this weird little moving shadow, like a reminder that privacy was officially canceled. Later, the nervous clipboard guy and the other board member came back with soil probes, jabbing them into my front yard, like they were searching for buried treasure, bagging clumps of dirt, labeling them samples. When I asked what they thought they were doing, the guy mumbled something about suspected unauthorized fertilizer compounds and practically sprinted back to his car. Every new citation came in an envelope that Brenda personally theatrically stuffed into my mailbox, flipping the red flag up with a little flourish to make sure I saw it like she was raising a battle standard. One of the only bright spots in those 72 hours was Roy, who showed up on my porch with 2 steaming mugs, like the kind of neighbor everybody wishes they had. "Figured you could use this," he said, and stood beside me, watching the drone buzz along the property line. He told me how Brenda had fined his sick wife for the color of her bird feeders while she was going through chemo. How half the folks on that road had late notices or liens hanging over their heads for things like lawn chairs and holiday decorations. We did not say it out loud, but we both understood. These fines were not about safety or property values. They were about control. Of course, Brenda found out about the coffee. That afternoon, her SUV screeched to a stop by Roy's old rusted truck. She hopped out, pointed at the peeling paint like it had personally offended her, and said loud enough for me to hear, "Roy, this vehicle violates our rust and appearance standards." You are being cited, slapped a ticket on his windshield, and drove off without even waiting for a response. Roy looked over at me, shoulders heavy, then turned and went inside. That was her way of underlining the lesson for everyone watching you stand next to Mark. I come for you next. That night, my daughter Megan called from 3 states away, voice tight with worry, and I tried to explain what was happening without dumping all my anger in her lap. The arrest, the inspection circus, the drone, the fines, the eviction notice ticking down over my head. She listened quiet, then said, "Dad, just sell it. It's just land. It's not worth your health. It's not worth you getting arrested again. Come live closer to us. Let her have this fight." And I knew she meant well, but it felt like a knife, because to me the ranch was not just land. It was home. It was Emily. It was everything we built together. After we hung up, I stood on the porch and actually considered. It really considered calling a realtor, cutting my losses and walking away. And for a second, I felt like I might just sit down on those steps and let the place sink without me. Then another part of me, the part that has spent 20 years digging through HOA paperwork and watching what happens when nobody pushes back, woke up. I realized I had been fighting Brenda as a homeowner, and as a homeowner, I was always going to be on defense. She had the letterhead, the local sheriff, the illusion of authority. But that is not the only person I am. I am also the guy whose name is on those dry oversight memos. She has never bothered to read the one who signs off on her management company's compliance reports, and I knew exactly where to look for the cracks she did not know she had. So I went inside, opened my laptop on the kitchen table next to the eviction notice, logged into the secure federal portal I have used 1,000 times for other people's neighborhoods, and pulled up the filings for Canyon Ridge Meadows and their parent company. The charter looked polished. At first glance, nice logo, legal language, but buried in the fine print was a renewal clause. A 5-year term that had come and gone 6 months ago, with no updated filing, no extension, no nothing. On paper, their HOA did not legally exist anymore, which meant every fine and every lien, every enforcement action after that expiration date was a ghost. A bluff backed by nothing but fear and ignorance. The bylaws said board members had to be elected by homeowners every 2 years in an open vote. But when I went through the meeting minutes for the past 5 years, all I saw were identical entries for board members. Klein, Dorsey, Pratt, reappointed by unanimous consent of current board. No ballots, no candidate lists, no community participation at all. Just the same 3 names, rubber stamping their own power. Then I followed the money. Because if there is one thing I have learned, it is that paper bullies almost always pay themselves somewhere. The budget had line items for resurfacing the main road and upgrading the neighborhood park, big numbers, and I knew from living there that nothing had been resurfaced, and the park still looked like a patch of grass with a tired swing set. Those payments went to a consulting firm with a fancy name and a P.O. box address. And the state business registry said that firm had exactly one owner, Brenda Klein. At the same time, I called my old assistant Jess in D.C. and asked her to pull everything she could on Canyon Ridge Meadows Management Company, a corporation out of Chicago called Heritage Community Management. And I smiled when she said the name, because Heritage is on my personal list. They are one of the companies I am officially assigned to oversee at the federal level. I filed a top priority oversight request, flagging Canyon Ridge for expired charter governance failures and suspected financial misappropriation, which meant Heritage's lawyers and compliance folks were about to start breathing down Brenda's neck. And then I designed something simple from my side of the fence, a one-page sworn statement neighbors could fill out listing what they had been fined for and how much. The next morning, I walked a stack of those forms over to Roy's workshop, explained who I really was and what I had found, not as some desperate guy clutching at straws, but as an investigator who had finally decided to treat his own life like one of his cases. Roy read the header, looked up at me, and this slow grin tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Took you long enough to start being yourself," he said. Then took the stack and spent the afternoon going door to door, talking to people in kitchens and garages, and by nightfall, my table was covered in statements, fines for Christmas wreaths, kids' bikes left on porches, lawn chairs visible from the road, bird feeders the wrong color, all of it adding up to a pattern of harassment that had nothing to do with safety and everything to do with ego. That night, an email popped up from a contact inside Heritage, forwarded from corporate. Subject line in all caps, "Mandatory Emergency Board Meeting, Canyon Ridge Meadows," with a line saying their compliance director, a woman named Lauren Chen, would be flying in. And at the very bottom, one little sentence, primary agenda item, review of issues raised by Federal Oversight Director Mark Collins. That right there was the twist in the story, the moment where everything quietly flipped, and Brenda just did not know it yet. The community hall was packed when I walked in for that meeting. Folding chairs set up in crooked rows, every seat full. People standing along the walls, phones out, the air. Buzzing with that nervous electric feeling you get when everybody knows something big is about to happen, but no one is sure which way it is going to go. At the head table, Brenda sat between her two board members' blazer on jaw tight, trying to project control, and at the end sat Lauren in a tailored suit with a slim file folder and the calm expression of someone who has come to do surgery, not make friends. I did not sit in the audience. I took the empty chair facing them and set a thick binder down. And I watched Brenda's eyes flick to it just for a second before she grabbed a little gavel and tried to talk over the tension. This emergency meeting was called to address a minor clerical question from our parent company, she said. "We'll begin with a statement from corporate, and then I'll explain." Lauren cut in. Not rude, just firm. "We're actually going to start with Mr. Collins," she said. "He's the one who brought the concerns to our attention." I picked up the mic, looked out at my neighbors, the same folks who had been crossing the street to avoid me a week ago, and said, "Most of you have seen a patrol car in my driveway or a drone over my pond. You have probably heard that I am some kind of problem neighbor who will not follow the rules. So tonight I want to talk about the rules, the real ones." I held up the charter. "According to this document, your HOA's legal authority expired 6 months ago and was never renewed," I said. "Legally, since that day, this association has had no power to fine you, lien you, or threaten your homes. They have been bluffing with a dead piece of paper. Murmurs rippled through the room. I held up the minutes. Your bylaws say board members are supposed to be elected by you every 2 years, I went on. In the last 5 years, there has not been one open election. They have simply reappointed themselves behind closed doors. You did not choose them. They chose themselves. Roy let out a sharp little laugh in the back, the kind that says, yeah, we all knew that. Deep down. Then I laid out the financials. The road that never got resurfaced. The park that never got upgraded, the consulting firm with Brenda's name on it. And when I said her name, heads whipped from me to her. So when you got told there was no money to fix a broken swing or fill a pothole, I said there was money. It just did not go where you thought it did. I handed out copies of the sworn statements and stepped away from the mic, and one by one, people stood up. Roy talking about the ticket his wife got while she was sick. A mom talking about threats to tow her kid's car on graduation day. Someone else talking about an unannounced inspection of their garage because of an oil stain. And you could almost see the fear burning off, replaced by anger. Brenda finally exploded, slammed her hand on the table, and shouted that I had hacked their records, that this was all a personal vendetta because I would not follow basic standards. And before I could even answer, Lauren stood up and said, "No, he did not hack anything." Then turned to the room and explained exactly who I am, that I am the Federal Oversight Director for Heritage's operations, that I am the one they send their compliance reports to, and that I already had authorized access to every one of those documents. You could feel the whole story tilt in that moment, like the floor had shifted a few degrees, and everyone suddenly saw which way gravity actually ran. Lauren announced that effective immediately. Brenda was suspended from all HOA duties, pending a full investigation, that she was no longer authorized to issue fines or notices or speak on behalf of Heritage. And when Brenda grabbed her bag and stomped out of that hall, nobody followed. It would have been a pretty clean ending if she had stayed gone. But like I said, bullies do not always go quietly. In the days after, while corporate dug through bank statements and the state looked at potential charges, Brenda started posting long, rambling screeds online about me being some deep state plant sent to destroy her community, dropping fake contamination warnings on people's doorsteps about my supposed illegal farm runoff. And most folks rolled their eyes and threw them away. But that current of poison still ran under everything. Then, a few nights later, my phone buzzed at almost 2 a.m. with a motion alert from the camera on my front gate. And when I pulled up the feed, I saw her, hoodie up, bolt cutters in hand, cutting the chain on my gate like she was breaking into a warehouse. She walked straight up the driveway, right past the house, and went for the barn, moving with that frantic, jerky energy people get when they are convinced the world owes them something, and they are going to take it back in the dumbest way possible. I did not yell, I did not grab a shotgun, and go storming out into the dark. I called Sheriff Porter, told him exactly what my cameras were showing, and that the feed was live, and he said to stay inside. I'm coming. I stepped out onto the porch, but stayed back in the shadows, watching the barn camera as she fought with the lock. Heard the distant hum of an engine, then saw his cruiser swing into the drive, headlights off, until he was close, and then the floodlights snapped on and lit everything up like midday. The cut chain, the bolt cutters. Brenda frozen in the beam like a deer. The sheriff walked past me, looked at the evidence laid out in front of him in steel and light, and said, "Ms. Klein, turn around and put your hands behind your back. No lecture. No long explanation messed that." She had no board, no clipboard, no fake authority left, just metal closing on her wrists in the same yard where she thought she had humiliated me a few days earlier. And I am not going to lie to you, watching her take that slow walk to the back seat that I had sat in felt like a knot in my chest, finally loosened. In the weeks after Heritage fired her, the state filed charges. The HOA got put into receivership and rebuilt properly. My neighbors got refunds on a lot of those bogus fines, and the drone disappeared from my sky, and the ranch slowly started to feel like home again, instead of a battlefield. I still sit on that dock some evenings and think about how close I came to signing it all away, just to get away from one woman with a clipboard who thought the world existed to match the picture in her head. So that is my story. A guy who spent his life keeping HOAs in line coming home to find out what it feels like when one of them turns on you personally and what it takes to fight back when everybody around you is saying, just let it go. Now, I am curious what you think. Did I go too far using every bit of power I had to bring her down? Should I have just sold the place and protected my peace? Or was fighting for my land and my neighbors exactly what someone in my position is supposed to do? Tell me in the comments if you have ever had to stand up to a petty tyrant with a little bit of power. HOA or boss or anyone else, share your stories. Argue with me if you want it. Like and subscribe if you think regular folks should not have to live in fear of a letterhead and a fine. And tell me, in your world, what does real justice look like?